You have a minute to talk about our Lord and Saviour, the A Song of Ice and Fireverse. Hello, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Muriel, and I'm going to share my thoughts about the very first episode of the new HBO show, House of the Dragon. Hence, this chunky bitch. Yes, and this is going to be pretty freeform, so if it's a bit chaotic, that's why. I did watch that first episode. By the time you see this video, I will have seen the second episode as well, and will probably, maybe, do a video about that as well, if I decide to make this an ongoing little series of informal commentary. I watched it, and it passed muster! Yay! So I'm going to start by giving thoughts about the episode in general, and then I'm gonna go into full spoiler territory. I'll put a timestamp, obviously, and going forward, it'll be spoilery stuff. But then, you know, like 1,000 other videos on YouTube, so I think that's okay, because if you care, it's because you're a fan of the books, right? In theory, at least. So, the obvious first point I must mention, which was absolutely majestic, dragons. I'm a slag for dragons, okay? That's just never gonna change. It's the name of my bloody channel, of course I'm gonna care about that. And they're so bloody majestic, come on! The most beautiful CGI dragons I've ever seen. HBO knows how to do that shit. Gotta give it to them. And like that open, well actually that's not the, it does start with the Council of Harrenhal, but that somewhat opening shot of Rhaenyra riding in on Syrax. Oh, I felt the feel, I did feel the feels. So points for the dragons, points for basically most everything else, honestly. The costume design, I mean it's HBO, right? I wouldn't expect any less from them at this point, especially since D&D have fucked off to who knows where. Good casting, actually, I would say. I buy actress as Rhaenyra and, you know, all the other characters. I have an issue with Corlys Velaryon. He shouldn't be the color he is, okay? Just, no. I will explain my reasoning in another video at some point. Worry not. No, it's not a racism thing. It's an accuracy thing. Though, to the credit of the showrunners, they did make his kids with Rhaenys, Lane and Laenor, like, look mixed race. You would say métis in French, so that makes sense, I guess. They do have the white Targaryen hair, so, well, I mean, Valyrian hair, sorry, so, okay. I guess I can kind of make it work in my head if I think that Corlys's mother was a Summer Islander, maybe, because I did go and check. There is no specific description of who his mother was, so let's say she was a Summer Islander, and that explains that, because otherwise it really bugs me. Anyway, production value, oh, the music, no, the music, I want to talk about the music. I absolutely adore the fact that they basically took the themes from Daenerys and Daenerys the Targaryen in Game of Thrones and elaborated upon that and made different melodies from that. And the ending melody as well, you know, the music from the credits is basically the Game of Thrones intro music, which is still the best intro for a TV show of all time. Just fight me on that. Yeah, I love that it was that music, but with more chorus sounds and things like that. That was a nice touch. And from what I could tell, it is book accurate. I mean, it is lore story accurate. So, I mean, to be fair, the Dance of the Dragons takes a significant chunk of this thing. So far, it seems relatively accurate, though I read this a while ago, and I didn't reread it beforehand, though I was surprised by how decent my memory is of that story. So, yay for me, because I could identify most of the characters. I was like, that's this person, and this person's gonna do this, and etc. So kudos to my memory there. I give it my stamp of approval so far. So far, it's only episode 1, but compared to my reaction after episode 1 of Foundation, episode 1 of The Wheel of Time, this soars above. So if you wanted to know about that, yes, I do give my stamp of approval. Now moving into spoilery thoughts. I do like the opening scene with the council at Harrenhal explaining the whole succession issue, and instead of going with primogeniture, they go with, I know there's a term in like historical analysis for inheritance through the eldest male child, but I can't recall what it is, but it's not primogeniture. I know that. So that was well realized, exactly what it needs to be, and then you open with Rhaenyra coming in on Syrax to King's Landing. that was so nice. And I like Rhaenyra's portrayal. Oh, I love the fact that, you know, they speak Valyrian, High Valyrian. amongst themselves, where I mean, Daemon with Rhaenyra, they speak Valyrian, and, you know, I did some High Valyrian on Duolingo because I'm that big of a nerd, and A Song of Ice and Fire nerd specifically, so I could identify some words and the negatory formula. So basically Valyrian, in High Valyrian, if you want to say a negative sentence, you put daor at the end of it. I was like, oh, I recognize that. The Iron Throne also is actually more book accurate here than it ever was in Game of Thrones. It's like spread out with molten swords and stuff, so that was well done. There's this little touch where King Viserys sits down in the Iron Throne, he actually pricks his finger on it. I was like, nice. You know, it's in the details. It's those little details that make it delicious. HBO has decided to crank up the TNA again just a wee bit. If you don't know what TNA is, it's tits and ass. I mean, it was okay. I wasn't bothered by it. You don't see too much fleshy bits as such. You do see some boobage, but, you know, they're just boobs. That's fine. You see a bit of buttocks as well. Male buttocks, though. You know, there's this thing. You have a scene with Daemon in a brothel, yes, with, I assume it's Missaria. And they have this weirdly affectionate moment, actually. Because Daemon basically is like having sex with her and he can't finish because he's bothered by the idea that he wants to succeed to his brother because his brother doesn't have a male heir. He only has Princess Rhaenyra. And so he's like all dejected and he covers himself with a shawl. I know it's the randomest thing to focus on, but you gotta understand, that's what I do sometimes when I feel down. I just kind of put my soft blanket over my head and I just huddle like that. And he did that with a shawl. This is a grown-ass man. I mean, why couldn't a man do that? Of course, but you wouldn't usually expect to see that. And he's like all vulnerable and shit under his little shawl. And then Missaria comes up to him and she's like, oh, it's okay. And then she cradles his head against her chest. I don't know, it was kind of sweet. It was unexpectedly sweet, I guess is what I mean. There is quite a bit of violence. That jousting was a thing. People died. People got seriously maimed and injured. But then again, I mean, that's probably what it was like in real life. Jousting wasn't supposed to be this pretty thing. That's one of the things, you know, about these series. I mean, obviously this is fantasy, it's not historical fiction, but I think it's kind of a good thing not to romanticize those periods of history or these analogies to real periods of history. This shit was horrible. There was violence, and there was murder, and injustice, and it was gritty and not nice. Of course, I don't like gratuitous violence either, but here I think it's just setting appropriate, to be honest. You have that scene where Daemon, who is head of the City Watch, going down into town and, well, rounding up the rabble of presumably criminals, though they don't exactly have access to due process, so. And a fair few hands are chopped off. A fair few ball sacks are chopped off, because that's what you do to rapists. There, apparently, you know, chopping off the hand because thieving. Not nice, but again, kind of setting accurate, to be honest. I mean, Daemon himself is a very great character. And the funny thing, too, is you see Rhaenyra, and she's about what? I actually, again, bothered to go, not even in my book, but like on the internet, when was she born? How old is she exactly? Because I wanted to make sure she's like 15 or 16 in that first episode in any case. She should age up as the series moves along. And she has these interactions with her uncle, and I'm like, just, yep, they're gonna fuck. I mean, I know that's what's gonna happen, but it's like, it's funny as a reader, you kind of pick up on those things. You're like, I know where that's going. There's also Kristen Cole, who is introduced during the tourney. I'm like, you're gonna fuck him too. And there's also Harwin Strong, and does she have sex with him as well? Like, she gets around Rhaenyra after a point, like, yeah, you go get you some, woman, and fuck shit up for your reign. But that's a separate matter. So yes, gonna screw your uncle, gonna screw this hedge knight, this nobody. Does she ever actually have sex with Laenor Velaryon? That's kind of the question mark in the story. I'm also curious if they're gonna bring in Mushroom. I think there's a way you could incorporate Mushroom in the story. It would provide comic relief, to say the least, but it could also be a bit too goofy. I don't know. What do you think? As fans, I'm curious about this. And then, of course, the Hightowers. Immediately I was like, that's Otto Hightower, that's Alicent Hightower, oh yes. And Alicent Hightower already being sent to seduce the king, who just lost his wife in childbirth. That was also pretty gruesome, that cesarean section scene without any anesthetic. Not nice. I was a bit confused about that because they do give her milk of the puppy, I'm assuming, but I could be overthinking this way too much, which wouldn't be a first for me. But I was like, maybe the Maester thinks that she's already hopped up quite significantly on milk of the puppy, and so if he gives her more, that could maybe kill the baby if it goes through the placenta? I'm probably overthinking it, to be honest, but I was like, they could have at least knocked her out because this poor woman dies in agony, and that's like, dude. But then you're reminded of that's what it was like to be pregnant back before this is fantasy once again, but if you transfer it to the real world, that's what it was like before modern medicine, or, without traditional midwifery techniques, perhaps in certain cultures, but if you had a breech baby, you're fucked. I'm sorry, pregnancy is fucking terrifying when you're a Homo sapiens. I don't know how anyone could actually consciously want this. Wanting a child, I get, but women who actually look forward to being pregnant, I'm like, I cannot relate to that at all. I think it's terrifying anyway. And I did also appreciate the fact that Caraxes kind of looks a bit different from Cyrax. Because, dragons are supposed to be both male and female in A Song of Ice and Fire, so it has kind of these membranes on the end of the tail, and I was like, oh, nice, some phenotypical variability there. I approve. You know what? Yeah. Because, in A Game of Thrones, or in the main series of A Song of Ice and Fire, you just get Dany's dragons. And Dany's dragons are magnificent, don't get me wrong, but they all look the same. Presumably they're part of the same clutch. That's what we're going to go with anyway. Whereas you do have several different dragons. I don't know the number exactly, I can't remember, by the time of the Dance of the Dragons, which is where shit gets wild. So you have all these dragons, so yes, why not put in some phenotypical variability, like I said, just play around with that. Yes. I like that. Show me some beautiful but slightly different dragons. Cool. And I just love the way they showed the dragon handlers at the dragon pit and using High Valyrian to talk to the dragons and give them commands. Daenerys does that with Dracarys, with her dragons, but here you see additional stuff, basically. I do have high hopes. Reasonably managed hopes for House of the Dragon, because it is based on not a completed novel, but a completed story, a completed corpus of text. So, they don't really have much of an excuse to fuck this up, really. And besides, there's not much supernatural stuff at all here. Apart from the dragons, it's mostly politics, imitating the fucked up politics of medieval and Renaissance Europe. So yeah, have fun with that, basically, and then throw in some dragons to fuck shit up. It has kind of rekindled my love for A Song of Ice and Fire. It is one of my favorite works of fantasy of all time. And it was more than an all-time favorite, it was actually legitimately an autistic special interest. Like, I got really intense about A Song of Ice and Fire for a while there. So yes, it was not only an all-time literary favorite, it was a literary special interest. And now I'm getting those feelings again, you know what I mean? And it's nice. A little addition from my editing self. I forgot to add that there was something that bugged me about this episode, though. It's when King Viserys brings in Princess Rhaenyra into a kind of shrine room with the skull of Balerion the Black Dread, and he tells her, I will name you as my heir. And then he goes on this tangent about the fact Aegon the Conqueror had a prophetic dream, just like I can't remember which Targaryen had this prophetic dream about the doom of Valyria. And so Aegon had this dream where he saw this big, supernatural, potentially human wiping out threat, and that there would have to be a Targaryen there to, protect humanity from this threat. And he names this dream A Song of Ice and Fire. And I kid you not, my automatic reaction when I heard that was, bitch! I was not a fan of that. I thought it was completely unnecessary. I assumed they threw that in to have overt linkage with the series A Game of Thrones. That was like, for one thing, Aegon never had that dream, I'm pretty certain. And I don't know, it just rubbed me the wrong way, because at the end of the Game of Thrones as well, you have Samuel Tarly writing a book as a blatant ripoff of the ending of Lord of the Rings, where he writes A Song of Ice and Fire, and once again, I kid you not, I flipped my table when I saw that. I was just so bloody angry. So it just left a bad taste in my mouth. It was not necessary, and it just reminded me of unpalatable things in relationship to this adaptational IP. So yeah, I could have done without that. I don't have nearly as much, no, actually scrap that. I don't have any confidence for for Rings of Power. I'm gonna watch it and get back to you on that, worry not. Zero expectations there. The House of the Dragon, very good start. So yay, we can look forward to that as fans. I of course welcome comments about this. I welcome comments in the Discord server as well. The link is still down in the description down below. You're very welcome to join. So on that very final note, I hope you'll have a lovely day, evening, or whichever time of day you prefer. Do take good care of yourselves. Thank you for the continued support, and I shall see you all reasonably soon in another video. Bye-bye.